morning. Welcome to the big meeting of the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. I'm Ann Orsi. I'm one of the organizers of the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to maintaining the separation between religion and government. We advocate for a scientific and humanistic point of view, and we want to improve human society. You can find out more about the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers on the web at arfreethinkers.org. The most reliable way to find out about us is to come to our meetings and actually talk to the people who are involved. Come to our events. Our calendar is on meetup.com. Just search for the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers. We're going to start with a free thought of the day. And the free thought of the day is a segment of our monthly program when we look at a quote or an idea or a concept that appeals to us as free thinkers. Today's free thought is going to be more of a biographical sketch. I want to focus on the humanism of Clara Barton. She was born Clarissa Harlow Barton, called Clara, on December 25th, 1821 in Massachusetts. Her parents were members of the Universalist Church, which is one of the churches that was the precursor to the Unitarian Universalist Church where we are today. Clara was a deist and remained a creedless Universalist throughout her entire life. Her first career was as a teacher. She started New Jersey's first free public school, and despite the school's success, she was quickly replaced by a man. She was demoted from her position as headmistress and, as many of us would do today, quit. We don't blame her. She then went to work at the U.S. Patent Office in D.C., where she was the first female who was paid equivalent to her male counterparts. She was working at the Patent Office on April 19th, 1861. Which was the first blood that was shed in the Civil War during the Baltimore riot. Baltimore is 40 miles from Washington, and when the victims were transported after the violence to the U.S. state capitol, she went to the capitol. She heard that they were there. She went down to the railroad station first, and when the victims arrived, and then went to the state capitol, and she nursed these 40 men who had been wounded and were hungry and had no supplies, and they were far from home, and 40 miles was a lot further then than it is now. But they didn't have any supplies other than what they carried on their backs, and they were in trouble. Along with several other women, Clara Barton personally provided clothing, food, and other sorts of supplies to these sick and wounded soldiers. She figured out how to organize, store, and distribute medical supplies for their needs. She offered emotional support to them. She read books to them. She just spent time talking with them, and she wrote letters to their family for them. All things that anyone would do out of compassion for another human being. Then the war continued, obviously, and when she heard that soldiers were dying for lack of medical supplies after the first Battle of Bull Run, she organized a relief drive. Through all of this, she's still working at the U.S. Patent Office, but because of her humanitarian work, the U.S. Surgeon General granted her a pass to travel with the Union Army. She went with the ambulances, and she's middle-aged at this point. She's been around the block a time or two. But still unmarried, still a single woman. So yeah, we like Clara. In February 1865, as the war was just a couple of months before the end of the war, she discovered that thousands of letters from the distraught families of missing soldiers were going unanswered. They were sending these letters to the U.S. government saying, "Where is my family member? We don't know if he's missing, we don't know if he's killed, we've gotten no word, all we know are taken prisoner." The soldiers who were killed in action were often buried in unmarked graves and sometimes even in mass graves. She got permission from President Lincoln, who had not yet been assassinated, to respond to the letters, and she ran the Office of Missing Soldiers to find or identify those soldiers that were killed or missing in action. And that included 13,000 men who died at the Confederacy's notorious Andersonville prison camp in Georgia. By 1868, she was famous for what she was doing. She embarked on a lecture circuit. She met Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass, and she became an activist for civil rights and for women's suffrage. I mean, if you meet Susan B. Anthony, of course you're going to become an activist for women's suffrage, right? Then she traveled to Europe in 1869, where she met Dr. Louis Appia, who was one of the founders of the Red Cross in Geneva, the original Red Cross, which is, of course, the symbol comes from the Swiss flag. At the beginning of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, she helped organize and distribute supplies to the destitute people of France and Prussia. This was not just to the soldiers, but to the people who had been displaced or whose livelihoods had suddenly been taken out from under them, whose homes had been destroyed, refugees, and other people who just were trying to live in the middle of a war. She was awarded the Prussian Iron Cross and the Golden Cross of Baden in recognition for her humanitarian work. So when she returned to the U.S. in 1873, she stayed there for several years. She started lobbying for the creation of an American Red Cross, advocating for a neutral relief effort in times of conflict, and she was turned down repeatedly, mostly because probably we'd just been through a civil war, we're not going to plan another one yet. We're going to wait 100 years for that. So she finally made the argument that the American Red Cross could help during times of natural disasters, not just wars, and that won over Rutherford B. Hayes. If we don't remember President Hayes for anything else, remember him for agreeing to allow Clara Barton to form the American Red Cross. She served as its director until 1904, so for a very long time, and she died at the age of 90 in 1912. So she was 82 when she finally resigned from running the Red Cross. She had led this amazing, extraordinary life devoted to humanitarianism, the humanist treatment of others. So I find her to be a humanist inspiration, completely humanist inspiration. At each meeting, we invite a local freethinker to tell a story about themselves. Our local freethinker has just entered the building, and he is taking his jacket off. His name is Bern Bradley. Bern, I'm going to kill a little time here telling you a little bit about Bern. Bern just had major surgery, so the fact that he's vertical right now, everybody's really happy about that. He has been through the meat grinder, pretty much literally. Bern is on the board of the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers, and he is going to share the story today. Come on up, Bern.
Hello. Can you see? Oh, yeah. Yeah, she wasn't joking. The WID intended to do about 4 different things, and they skipped one thing. And I'm asking why, after 13 years I've been told I want to need that, and they said, didn't need it. 13 years they've been telling me, nope, you didn't need it, so we shall see. My story today is about one of my... Would you like to sit on me?
That would be fine.
Jim is trying to do adequate audio of this so we can send it out to the world. This is about one of my favorite people in the entire world. She was the first person I ever met who was an atheist. Didn't like using that word, but would say, I just don't believe in that. Well, you believe in Buddha? No, I don't believe in any of it. And she was born under the name Ruth Ernestine Bland in Little Rock. Grew up, her mother, she and her mother turned out to be a lot alike. Her mother didn't really see the need for having a daughter around when she was trying to get men over to the house. And so Ruth Ernestine spent most of her time being raised by her grandmother. Ruth ended up having 4 husbands, and all of them she let know that she didn't have to have them. They were a convenience to her, except for the last one. And she let him think she really needed him, and she took his name and never gave that up. But at one point was doing his washing. Never did washing for the other 3 husbands. They either sent it out or did their own, and was putting socks away in his sock drawer and found a gold cigarette lighter that said "To Bud from Priss" on it. And she asked him, "Who's Priss?" He said, "Well, that's my nickname for you." She said, "Well, you said that once, but I've never used it." She said, "Yes, but you gave me this just, like 6 months ago." Nope. Well, okay, the truth is, I saw it and I knew it was something you'd want me to have. So I got it and inscribed it like that. She said, "Try again." And that's when he admitted that every girlfriend he'd ever had in his lifetime, he had nicknamed Priss so that he didn't have to remember their names. That was pretty much the end of that marriage. But as a little girl, old enough to understand some concepts and not old enough to understand others, Easter came. And she got a basket of, an Easter basket with eggs in it. And in the 30s, this would have been hard-boiled eggs with food coloring on them as a huge treat. I can't eat them as they are now, much less thinking back to being a kid as having that be a treat. But Ruth Ernestine was happy with it, but Grandma sat her down and said, "The little boy next door, his mother's in the hospital, so he didn't get any eggs." And Ruth Ernestine says, if the Easter Bunny wanted him to have eggs, he'd have eggs. His mother being in the hospital does not keep the Easter Bunny from coming to the house. Grandma then says, "Ruth Ernestine, you're too old to believe in that nonsense." And she cried, and she cried, and she cried. And finally, Grandma said words she would come to regret. She said, "Ruth," because Ruth says, "I'll bet you have lied to me about Santa Claus too." And Grandma says, "Ruth, Santa Claus is just as real as Jesus. And if he was here, you could reach out and touch him." And Priss Price, for the rest of her life, believed exactly that Santa Claus and Jesus existed on the same plane of existence. And if you needed one, it's okay. But if you didn't, don't make me believe it either. Thank you.
If you'd like to share a story like Vern just did, doesn't have to be your story, it can be someone else's story. Thank you. Or even just part of some story. Or if you'd like to share your own journey. We would love to have you at one of our future meetings talk about something that resonates with you about humanism, atheism, your journey of whatever religious belief you have or non-religious belief you have, or your skepticism. We really, really honor skepticism here. So we would love to hear something like that. One of the key functions of our organization is that we want to help free thinkers to make friends and connections. So we ask if you would please turn to somebody you don't know in this room and say hello. And for the next minute, just sort of, I know, it's like church, isn't it? Just for a minute, I swear, no more than 60 seconds.
This is when I first made this meeting.
I'm still kind of coming out of that. I'm better with it now. I had time through one questioning, and then I was like,
Okay, that's enough friendship. That's enough friendship. Yeah, now I'm trying to close the box. If I could have your attention. Yeah, I need a gavel. Or a bell to ring. So, the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers is a diverse organization with members that represent a wide range of opinions. And we invite speakers who we think will be interesting and who we hope will make us think. Today, we have Caleb Alexander McKenzie as our featured speaker. Caleb is a lawyer. He graduated from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock's William J. Bowen School of Law. Bowen is notorious for having non-traditional students along with students who have just graduated from college. I know that at least 3 other people in this room also went there, so welcome, lawyers. Caleb was definitely on the non-traditional path, and his story is a really great one. For years, he has volunteered with The Van, which is a local nonprofit that provides resources and assistance for our unsheltered neighbors here in central Arkansas. The Van opens emergency shelters when frigid winter hits Arkansas. Last month, The Van was on high-octane go, trying to help people when we got so cold here. And the Van also advocates for those who experience homelessness. Caleb currently serves on, he's currently board president for the Arkansans for Stronger Communities. I'm going to get that out right. Which is a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for Arkansas renters and promoting tenant-friendly legislation. Arkansas has the worst landlord-tenant laws in the entire country. And they are so landlord-friendly that tenants don't even have a right of habitability in a home that they rent, and no way to enforce anything like that. Caleb and his husband, who is an RN, are both Arkansas natives and residents of Little Rock, where he tells me he stays busy cleaning up after their 3 demanding but adorable dogs. Please welcome Caleb Alexander McKenzie. You have water down here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann, for that introduction. And I just want to say thank you all for having me to be here. I'm also glad that there's some other attorneys in the room. Sometimes when somebody leads off with he's an attorney, you don't get the warmest of welcome. So I appreciate this. This actually works out. This works out a lot better than it could have. and so before I get into the organizations that I work with and everything, a little bit of background. I am an Arkansas native. I grew up in a little town called Devall's Bluff, about 45 miles from here over in Prairie County. My father's a Church of Christ minister, and that actually frames how I got to where I am today. In 2008, I came out as a gay man, and my family had a lot of trouble with that. And so I had 2 options because it got to where I could not continue to go on and be in school without lack of support. So my options were either to run off and do something else or move home with my parents, go back in the closet. There was a talk of things like special therapies to help cure me. I'm using air quotes for those of you who can't see me. So I did what every young gay boy does. I packed up my stuff and I went and joined an industrial construction company in Florida and spent the next couple of years building high-rises and power plants as an iron worker. And so that took me all over the U.S. In 2012, I rode my Harley home from Georgia to the 4th of July party, and I met the man who would later become my husband, and so I got sucked back into Arkansas. At one point in time, I never thought I was going to come back to this state, but things happened differently, and I was running away from a lot of stuff, and I'm glad I ran back. I love this state. I love the people in it. I love the connections in this state. I love the things that we can do. All of that led me to eventually moving to Little Rock when my husband graduated as an RN. He is now employed. He's a great job, but that brought us here. I took a look around and I started seeing a lot of folks who were on street corners. Started seeing a lot of tents just out of sight off in the woods. And I started wondering, what are those people doing there? Are they okay? What do they need? How can I help? You drive down Little Rock and there may be a religious institution on every corner, but there's also somebody sleeping on those steps, not getting help. So I started looking for the helpers, which is a great phrase. It goes way back. I'm not sure who originally coined it, but look for the helpers. And I met a man named Aaron Redden. And Aaron started about 13 years ago now a nonprofit called The Van. At the time, he had a Toyota Yaris, and he packed as many pants and shirts as he could find in the trunk of that Toyota Yaris, and he started driving around Little Rock and North Little Rock. And he started checking on people who lived outside and said, hey, what do you need? Now, Aaron has his own story. You ought to hear it sometime, but he's experienced homelessness and has a whole track. That, he's one of my best friends and a great man. But his story's not mine to tell, so talk to him sometime. But years down the line, that led to me meeting Aaron and saying, hey, what can I do? Well, at the time, it was winter time. And one of the things that the van does, besides just passing out hygiene items, material goods to folks who sleep outside, we do emergency shelters. So if it drops below 32 degrees and there's winter precipitation, or if it's 25 and dry, we open up. We invite anybody and everybody. We have volunteers that go pick people up and bring them in. So I did that. And I think Aaron was worried that it would scare me off, but it hooked me. And I've been doing this for 6 years now. I drive around in the van every Tuesday. I do Southwest Little Rock and I do North Little Rock, and I find folks who need help and we give it to them. If I have it in that van and they need it, they can have it. We do not charge. We do not ask for an ID. We do not evangelize. I don't particularly care what your backstory is. I'd love to hear it, but it's not going to prohibit you from getting help. And that's the point. And so I appreciate the message of humanism that's based out of this, because I think that's what's lacking in a lot of our social services, is the humanist element. As a human, in my opinion, be that what it is, I think you deserve certain things by the nature of the fact that you are still breathing on this planet. You deserve dignity, you deserve clothing, you deserve hygiene, you deserve shelter, and you deserve an opportunity. And as the van, that's what we look at to continue to come back and bringing that. It's a slow approach. Our goal is mainly to make sure that we're able to take the donations and pass it out, but we also build relationships. A lot of people want to inject themselves into unsheltered folks' lives and get them into a programmatic setting as fast as possible. They fast track them, and they're not ready for that yet. And so they end up, being brought into somewhere. They can't meet the needs and the requirements of those organizations, so they get kicked right back out. And now they're right back where they were, but this time they don't have any of the resources that they had before. Their tent's gone, their clothes gone, and so they're stuck. So they turn to the same coping mechanisms they had before, be that what it may. And that's not my underhanded way of saying everybody out there is facing addiction issues or alcoholism. Their coping mechanism may be just living away from people. So I can take you to 100 different people who live outside. They've got 100 different problems, if not more, that's keeping them out on that street. So that's what the van does, and that's kind of how I got to be here. The other side of that is what Arkansans for Stronger Communities does. Ann is 100% right. It is not hyperbole to say that Arkansas has the worst tenant laws in these United States. They are, I could use a lot of words, but I'm not going to use the ones I want to. They're absolutely, they're abhorrent. Arkansas is the only state that lacks what's called an implied warranty of habitability. That means that in Arkansas, or I should say that means in 49 other states, if your rental, your apartment, has a hole in the roof, you can go to your landlord and say, hey, the outside air is getting inside. I'm going to withhold rent until you get this fixed because we signed a contract, and you need to honor that contract. Arkansas, that doesn't matter. If you're one day late on rent, they have the right to go to the courts, and they have the right to start the eviction process, which leads to another thing that Arkansas has the distinct misfortune of being the only state We're the only state that has what's called a criminal eviction statute. It's 1816-101 of the Arkansas Code. And what that says is if the landlord goes through the process, the legal process of going through evictions, and they serve you with an eviction, you've got 10 days, 10 whole days to come up with first month's rent, last month's rent, and a new deposit, and find a new place to live. Or it's a misdemeanor offense that is stackable. It can keep hitting you. That's about a $25 a day fine, I think maximum, that the courts can impose on you. And we're also talking about people who are facing some of the most extreme poverty of anybody in Arkansas. So it's kind of hard to get that. When we have families who have to pull their children out of schools and find new locations, they just don't have the ability to do that. So we force Arkansas renters who are in this situation to choose between criminalization and homelessness. That's a terrible spot to be in. It's a terrible spot for anybody to be in. We have families that are sleeping in cars, and we have families that make that choice to not vacate. They'll face the fines just so their kids continue to have a place to live for a few more days till they can get their life together and move on. We are working to fix that. I am happy to report that in the last legislative session, myself, along with some others in our Kansas for Stronger Communities, worked together to push through some legislation. We didn't get everything we want, but we got something started. We put the initial parts of a warranty of habitability on the books. Our Kansas for Stronger Community is not a 501c3. We're actually a 501c4. It's a little bit different. Here's the distinction. The downside of it is that when you donate money to us, you can't deduct it from your taxes, which makes everybody wants to donate to a C4, right? It's kind of hard to raise funds. The other side of that is we can take that money and we can pay probably the only group that people dislike more than lawyers, which is lobbyists. We can pay those lobbyists to go in there and advocate for our bills. They hook us up with the people that we work with, and we go through and we try to make change. We did some good work last time. Again, we didn't get a full warranty of habitability, but we got something on the books. It is much easier in Arkansas to amend an existing statute than it is to put something brand new on the books. We're going back this time. We're going to ask for a little bit more. We're asking for better remedies, and we're going to ask for anti-retaliation. I can speak, I promise. Anti-retaliation portion of that statute. So landlords are going to be prohibited, if we pass this bill, from evicting tenants who go to different type of, be it your city code enforcer or whatever, to report violations of this. Again, right now that doesn't exist. So we're working. And to me, these two things are intertwined. They're combined. You can't separate them. It's why I went to law school. Working with the unsheltered population, I began to hear the stories of their run-ins with the law that put them on the street or that kept them on the street. I'm a pragmatist. I actually like this organization because it encourages you to defy convention and to try to look at different approaches and different things. I understand that sometimes the law has to be punitive. We have laws for a reason, and sometimes those laws punish the wrongdoing of things. When it's directed and that's the intent, arguably that's fine. Some things, when the law is broken, you need to punish people for breaking that law. That's part of the justice system. But when it's inadvertent, that's where the problem comes in. Many of our laws, many of the conventional ways that our governments have addressed homelessness, have addressed housing, are conventionally punitive. And they don't mean it to be, but that's the way it's always been done. They run folks out of town. They push you to another place. They buy you a bus ticket. And it hasn't worked. It's arguably a side effect of Reaganomics. And it has not worked for 40 years. And we know that because we see the numbers of homelessness growing, and we see just a unstoppable increase in housing deficits. Affordable housing is a crisis across this country. You all hear about it all the time. I'm sure you know that. And those two things are intertwined. They're intertwined especially in a state like Arkansas, because we encourage landlords, we encourage slumlords, I should say, to mistreat people and to take predatory action against folks that are in the most dire straits that they can be in. I will offer you this place that doesn't have running water. I will offer you this place that doesn't have air conditioner or heat. I will offer you this place that has 3 walls and part of a roof. And for the low price of $300 a month that you can pay in cash, and we won't report this to anyone, you can have something akin to a home. which is slightly safer than where you're at right now. That's predatory action. To me, that's also it goes into these types of legislations usually go through the Insurance and Commerce Committee. To me, it's also a breach of contract. So these are where the lawyer aspects of things come in and what we're trying to fix. As I said, there is hope. I tell people all the time, don't lose hope. You do have people working towards you. If you do land on the street, you're going to have folks like me come by in a van. Now, you always hear as kids, somebody in a weird white van pulls up with no windows and stops and talks to you. Don't talk to them. In Little Rock, it might be me, so just check first. But we're going to keep coming out. We're going to keep helping folks. We're one of the few groups that do what we do to try to have a robust and well-rounded way of doing things. Hopefully we will pass legislation through Arkansans for Stronger Communities which fix some of these problems and starts closing these gaps, start closing these holes in the safety net so people quit falling through them. When the people do fall through, we want to make sure groups like the van have the tools they need and the materials they need and the backing that they need from the community to go out and make sure they catch those people when they fall. We do that in a couple different ways. The major way is by doing what we do. We drive around and pass out stuff. But the van, a few years ago, Aaron, who again started the van, got with our board and he started taking a step back and said, I want something more robust than this. What can we do? So we have our emergency shelters and we have the van, but we're missing some things. So we started buying little patches of land out in eastern North Little Rock with the goal of farming it. Aaron went and bought a bunch of chickens and a couple donkeys, which are really cool. Actually, and the donkeys protect the chickens, believe it or not. That's why they're there. They scare off the hawks. I don't know how this works. Nature's weird. I just worked there. So we started raising eggs, and we turn those eggs. Number one, we take a lot of them out and we give them to people because we know that the people who live in the periphery of Little Rock, really good cooks. They just don't have access to fresh produce. So we raise vegetables. We raise crops. And we take them out there to give to folks so that they can eat, they can have fresh food. And what we've seen happen with that is now they're eating better, they're healthier. We bought a whole bunch of big ice chests because folks don't have electricity, so they can't keep that food fresh. Now we put them in ice chests, they stay a little bit longer. But then when Aaron took a step back and was like, man, this is a lot of work. Sure wish I had some help doing this. What if we took part of these eggs and we actually turned it into money so that I could meet some folks and maybe pay some folks, get them working a living wage? And so we've done that. We now have 2 different positions out at our farm. We're paying folks who are formerly unsheltered. We also bought a couple of campers so they can have a place to stay while they work there, who are formerly unsheltered. And we get them set up. They're paying taxes. It comes out of their check. Everything's on the up and up. They are doing exactly what they need to do. So now they're developing credit. They're developing a standpoint. They use our address for things till they get back on their feet. And so we're going to keep growing that. We want to add new positions. We're now expanding that farm with the hopes of expanding what we're doing. And again, the van is a 501c3 nonprofit, so all of this is going back into the community. We're not keeping any of it. All of this is going back to those workers or to the tents and tarps that we pass out. So we've got a good thing going. In the future, what I would personally like to see, and one of the things that I'm personally working on by staying in this, are different places around our metropolitan cities, be it here in Little Rock, North Little Rock, anywhere else, that are called sanctioned campsites, safe sleeping spaces. In a city like Little Rock, there is, if you don't own a home or you don't have access to a rental or something like that, there is no legal place for you to exist. By the very nature of your homelessness, you are a criminal. If you are on public lands, you can get trespassed, and you have no right to be there. If you're on private lands, again, you're trespassing. You have no right to be there. So unless you just have a benevolent person who's going to let you stay there, you face getting tickets. The organizations can come in and throw away all of your stuff. They can bulldoze your tent. We've seen a lot of different groups come in and take their bush hogs and mow over everything because they don't want them there. Now I will say, and I'm very. Sometimes the nature of what we do, we butt heads with local government. The city of Little Rock has actually done really well, and I want to give credit where credit's due because we fought against them for a long time, so I'm glad to be shaking hands with them when we can. The city of Little Rock has actually stepped up. They are making sure that folks are, when they're camping somewhere, as long as they are not committing crimes in the traditional sense, they leave them alone. They have spaces that they tend to leave folks around. And this winter, like Ann said a few weeks ago, right before Christmas, when temperatures got down to close single digits, the van opened up our emergency shelter. The city gave us a space to do that so we could fit more people. And when we found ourselves in crisis, when a pipe broke and a water main shut down and we had no running water, the city stepped in and put almost 120 people in hotel rooms for 3 days during Christmas. That's the kind of partnerships that you can develop when you work with places and you get people in the positions that want to work together for the good of others, for humans. When you don't see somebody just out there who you're expecting to pull themselves up with bootstraps that they don't have. As Ann and I were talking earlier, it's hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have any boots. So we're going to keep plugging those gaps. We're going to keep doing the work. I know that you all brought donations. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Those are going to get taken out to our warehouse today, and they'll probably be out on the streets by tomorrow or Tuesday when I go out. We have a quick turnaround on these things. I am more than happy to answer any questions if you all have them, either here or I'll stick around for a little bit afterwards. But again, part of what we do, whether it is advocating for better laws with Arkansans for Stronger Communities or just doing the work we do in the van, exists because of word of mouth. Neither group could exist without the backing and the trust that Arkansas's citizens place in us, or that the people who care place in us. So we exist because, quite frankly, you guys allow us to exist, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you all for having me. Again, if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer.
Where Rodney Parham Road crosses Interstate 430.
Yep.
As you go, there's other people that know what I'm about to say, but after you cross the interstate and you're on Rodney Parham Road, on the right is a hill, a wooded hill that people camp in up there. And you know there's people camping up there because there's always someone at that street corner with a sign saying homeless need help, or God bless you need help, whatever. I watched one day as I was driving through there, and the State Highway Department was just pulling their tents and their sleeping bags out. That's not the city of Little Rock, that's the State Highway Department. And I saw in the news later that day that they justified it by saying the neighborhood needed to be kept safe. Those folks are not close enough to anyone to hurt anybody, and they're kind of a nuisance when there's two of them at every street corner trying to gather money, but all you got to do is not talk to them. How does the highway department justify that?
That's a question that you'll have to ask the highway department. I don't know that they can justify that. We have fought tooth and nail against that. We have asked them to repeatedly, hey, if you're going into an area, let us know. So there's a few things to that I want to address if I can have the privilege of a few minutes. Number one, panhandling is not synonymous with homelessness. There are a lot of people who are homeless who are experiencing homelessness, who do not panhandle. There's a lot of panhandlers who are not homeless or are not experiencing homelessness. There's a lot of people who are unsheltered experiencing homelessness who panhandle. So those aren't synonymous, but there is some overlap there. They have, this has gone up through the courts. A lot of people have said, hey, we noticed there's a lot more panhandlers and stuff now. Well, as it turns out, panhandling, you have a First Amendment right in the United States to ask for help. And I am glad that we live in a country where you have the First Amendment right to ask for help. To the extent that they keep trying to push back at it, but we're going to we have some really great attorneys in here who work for different organizations who continue to fight for that right, and I'm so glad we do. I'm on the inside. I actually work for an organization that represents cities and towns, so I'm on the other side of that equation. I talk to them all day long about better policies and stuff so that we don't run into things. I like to prevent litigation, so if we can do things that people don't get their civil rights violated, that actually it works out better because I don't want to see people get hurt. Now to the other part of that question. They have justified it by saying, hey, we have to protect these neighborhoods. Hey, we have to get in there and bush hog. It's really convenient that they wait till all the leaves have fallen so that you can actually see folks before they go in there and do it. We have asked them to notify us so that we can go in there and talk to the folks, try to help get them moved. Because here's what happens when you go in and you bush hog somebody's tent. The folks that we help largely carry everything that they own on their back in a backpack, for the most part, or they have their other belongings in a tent. That includes clothes, hygiene items, things you need to live from day to day, especially right now when it's cold. It also includes a couple other things. It includes many times, a lot of my friends carry their Social Security card and their birth certificate in a backpack. When that's gone, it's gone. If you don't have, there are 3 items you need. If you lose 2 of those items, like a Social Security, you can have a driver's license, Social Security card, birth certificate. If you got 2 of those, you can usually get the other ones. You lose 2 of them, you're in for a fight to get those other things replaced. It's hard. Medications get lost, get thrown away. They don't have access to their phone numbers, their support that they do have. That's gone. And so it sinks them really far down the line in this cycle of poverty that makes it increasingly harder for them to climb out of. Medications that deal with mental illness especially, that's when you start seeing them lack the ability to treat themselves, and they start spiraling down even further. So long-winded way of, I don't know how they justify it. I wish they would stop. And again, things like sanctioned campgrounds in our counties and in our cities. I will say Pulaski County is about to open up a place that the goal is to put 400 beds there, or 400 units there that will house people, and it is going to be a housing-first solution to homelessness. We're incredibly glad they're doing that. I hope it is extremely successful. I want to see more of it. They're using some of the American Rescue Plan funds to pay for it, as I understand it, so we're putting our tax dollars to good use. Very proud of that, because it's going to help, especially with acute homelessness. Folks who get evicted on Friday, they can go through. It won't. Arguably, I don't know that it'll help as much with people who have been chronically homeless, because there's unsheltered. There's a lot more loaded into that. So, but it is a first start. You have to have housing and you have to have services, and those things have to be combined if we're going to make homelessness brief and rare. So we're going to continue to work with that. I would personally like to see that move inside city limits. We have a lot of ground inside our cities and towns that is not being used. There's no reason that it can't be functionally a legal place for people to sleep at night. You police it the same way you police housing establishments. You provide the same services that you do, and it's largely this term gets thrown around as a lot of times. It makes me roll my eyes, but in this case, it's actually fiscally responsible. You will save your city money if you actually work to solve the problem instead of work to erase the problem.
In this campground I'm talking about, the problem I had with them doing that is the only way I knew people were up there is because I saw a rotating cast of people who were asking for money.
Yeah.
If it's the same guy all the time, and there's a guy at Cantrell and University. Same guy all the time. My son and I need $5.
Yeah.
He regularly gets $100 bills from people. I know this because I'm sorry.
That's not true.
No, it's true. I know this because he goes to the hardware store there, close to that's there, and cashes in his small bills for his large bills.
Well, I'm not his accountant, so I don't know what he's getting.
No. I'm not saying he doesn't need it either.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he's a regular there. Yeah. I don't think he's homeless. I think he's probably living somewhere and using that money for that.
Well, Ms. Bettina.
Let me, if you're going to speak, let me come to you with the mic so that we can get it in our recording. There you go, Bettina.
Thank you. I do want to ask a question, but I also want to say I do represent panhandlers and have sued a number of municipalities and the state and everything, for, asserting that panhandlers have a First Amendment right. I don't know a lot of panhandlers, but I know several. And I encounter these myths all the time. That's very interesting to me. People have told me all the time, oh, I saw this big Cadillac pull up, and all these people got out, and they panhandled, and at the end of the day, they came back and were picked up, and there's just a business. Or I hear things about $100 bills. That's one thing I just want to make a comment. There seems to be a lot of mythology around panhandling. I think it's so people don't feel bad if they don't give. That's what I think. My question is, I'm sorry, that's my speech. I really appreciate everything you're doing and the things you tell me about. I'm concerned, from what I see, this piecemeal additive response to the problem of homelessness, which does seem to be growing, and there's a lot of other municipalities that have been dealing. Is there any concerted, coordinated effort among different entities? I know the city has professionals that are dealing with this. The police department has social workers. Is there a coordinated kind of response to the problem where you could really maybe solve it?
I think too that one is congealing. I really do. I think now we are getting people in the right places to where that they are talking to one another. They're not only talking inside municipalities or inside local governments, they're talking outside local governments. We are now seeing more cooperation between governmental entities and nonprofits to help bridge those gaps. We're seeing more of a relationship develop there. So yes, I do think there is. People are finally waking up to the idea that, again, the conventional ways that you deal with this did not work, and they are proving to be increasingly inefficient as we see the housing crisis exacerbated that put more people on the streets. Now, to jump back real quick about this, I hear stories like that all the time too. And I can't tell you whether they're true or not. What I can tell you is I know a lot of people who live in tents who do also panhandle. Many of them are trying to scrape up the money so that they can afford to go down to a fast food restaurant and at least spend $20 a day for 2 meals that they can eat because they don't have a way to cook and they don't have a way to keep food. Because when I first started out at this, I was naive and I said, well, instead of doing this, why don't we just go to the grocery store? I'll load you up. And they said, yeah, but what's going to happen when it's outside for 2 days? I don't have electricity. I have no way to keep my food fresh. Makes a lot of sense. You can't get a motel room in Little Rock for less than $35 a night. And if you don't have an ID, you just can't get a motel room. So there's lots of reasons people ask for money. The best advice I can give anybody is if they're concerned about what the people who are out there, if you're concerned whether the money that you're giving or the materials that you're giving are actually going to somebody, is go have a conversation with them if you feel like it's safe to do so. I'm not going to encourage anybody to do something that they don't feel safe to do, but I think somewhere deep down, even me who tends to be pretty naive about some things, or gullible is probably a better word. We all have some type of internal, for lack of a better way to put it, BS meter. If you feel like somebody's lying to you, they very well may be. And just say, hey, well, I appreciate your story. I don't have anything to give right now. And go along about your day. That's the best advice I can give to counter those situations, is to go talk to them. Because, again, these are human beings. To talk to them, find out what they need. And we also, by the nature of what the services that have traditionally been available and historically been available, we incentivize people as a culture to lie about what they're going through, because the worse that they make it sound, the more help that they think they can get, which is sad. That's why, to me, we hear the thing all the time, why are we doing this when there's unsheltered veterans on the street? I don't care. I don't see a distinction there. I see a human being who needs help. I don't necessarily care what your backstory is. If you're unsheltered, you're unsafe, and you need housing now. So we shouldn't be putting those distinctions down. Humans are human beings, and they all deserve dignity and shelter to some level. So I really hope we're getting past that. Yes, sir.
What would be your advice to somebody who, let's say, just signed a 12-month lease, just put down a deposit, and just paid a first month's rent, and now the place is uninhabitable? Maybe the heat went out, maybe the water's not working, for some reason the place is uninhabitable. Is it best to just pack up and go as fast as possible and bail on your lease? Is it take legal action? Assuming you've already talked to the landlord and they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
What would you say?
That's a very tricky question considering the laws in Arkansas. The best advice I can give, number one, if you're below a certain income threshold, to make a phone call for the Center for Arkansas Legal Services. It's a governmental system. Their tax dollars go to it. It was created by the courts to help indigent and low-income people afford legal services. Talk to them first. Find out what you can do, because you can't walk out on your lease, because then that's a breach, right? And they're going to come after you in that. They also don't have a whole lot of incentive to do anything because of Arkansas's laws. But again, now we do have something on the books. At the very least, if they have breached that warranty of habitability, things like a lack of running water, they have to have that now. Those are in the Arkansas code. The only remedy that you really have is to sue and be able to break your lease without punishment. Again, that sounds a whole lot like being evicted. It sounds a whole lot like constructive eviction to me, but that's a whole different story. But in Arkansas, you can do that. You can seek legal help. You can also file a pro se if you need to sue to be able to break your lease and get out somewhere else. That's That's kind of the rock and hard place that you're in right now, unfortunately. Again, we are trying to work on some different things that would provide a better remedy. There are in other states, for example, you can do things like repair and deduct to a certain extent. You can't go out and buy a $4,000 air conditioning unit and just not pay rent for the next year or 6 months or whatever. But you can go out and spend, say, what would the equivalent of a month or a month and a half's rent, and say, hey, this was needed. Again, window was broken out. It's cold. We had to replace this window. It was $300. I'm deducting $300 from the rent. Here's the receipt to prove I did it. It's all hunky-dory. Other places allow you to do a number of other things, including in some states there are even punitive damages available if you go through the court system, but Arkansas is not one of those. So that's kind of where we're at.
Caleb, what besides water does the current statute require landlords to provide?
I don't have it in front of me. As far as I know, because there was some give and take on it, you do have to have running water. The building does have to be, I believe, wind and waterproof, so essentially no holes in the windows and roof. You do have to have electricity, and I believe it does have to have working heat and air. Now, whether that's an HVAC system or not, I'm not sure. What it doesn't require, and another thing I would personally like to see, is a mandate that on some level, if it were up to me, it would be if you rent a place out, period, but at least for larger rentals, some of these buildings, to have a mandate that they have to have working smoke and CO2 detectors, which there is no law in Arkansas mandating them to have that. You are safer in your hotel room for a night because of Arkansas laws than you are in the place that you're paying to rent to house your family for a longer period of time. So we would like to change that.
So what's the remedy at this point when there is a violation of that statute? What can a tenant do?
The only remedy that you have currently is the ability to break your lease and leave without punishment. So
It's essentially a constructive eviction.
It's essentially constructive eviction, yes. The remedy that exists right now is you can break your lease and leave without penalty. So if you break your lease and leave without going through the courts, then it affects your credit. Obviously, it's a black mark on your rental history. It makes it harder to get into a place. It's very expensive, very time consuming, but if you go through the court system to defend yourself, the current existing 50% of a warranty of habitability that we have at least serves as a defense to that, and you can break your lease and move out.
Thank you.
And I think, again, like this goes to show the broad picture of this was progress to where our rental laws were before. And we have a lot more progress to make, obviously, because we are still putting over 1 million Arkansans between a rock and a hard place.
So, a lot of organizations like this are kind of like, just give us some money and we'll take care of it and we'll do it. Is there anything in the van that people can actually work with? I mean, do you need skills in a volunteer basis? What kinds of things does the organization need? Like, do they need a organized person or a communications person? How can we help other than just writing a check and putting all the work on 2 more people?
Yeah, no. So we have an organization base. We have a Facebook group called Friends of the Van that serves as kind of an organizing hub. What I understand, there are some people who have tried to befriend it and are still waiting. So we're working on, we have somebody who covers our social media, but again, we're all volunteer based. The van has, other than the folks that we pay for to work on the farm part-time, the van has 1 member who gets paid. It's Aaron. Because of the nature of what he does, he legally has to. So he takes, his salaries, I think it's public knowledge, but he'll tell you it's under $40,000 a year. He makes like low 30s to do what he does. He works 80 hours a week. So this is his full-time gig, and he treats it like a job. But that's it. We are all volunteer based. But you can go on Friends of the Van, ask to be a member of it. That serves as a launching pad. We always need more volunteers to actually drive the van. So if that's something anybody's comfortable with doing, get with me and Aaron. We'll talk to you about it. We need volunteers when it comes to the overnights during inclement weather. But we also need people who are good on service. We have a working board, so we have some really great people who are on our board of directors. We have an attorney. We have some folks who are amazing at their job is technology and communications. But again, they also have their other jobs. So any type of professional services that somebody wants to donate and dedicate, we'll take it. We are very lucky to be working with the social work program from UALR. We have an intern who is amazing. He's the second one that we have. We're going to keep replacing that. They do things like train us on how to use Narcan, train us on how to fill out SNAP benefit applications, and connect people with services at places like Our House, make sure that people have a way to get to Jericho Way or River City Ministries, these other day resource centers. So really kind of any professional services that somebody thinks we might need, we probably do. That would be more of a question for Aaron because he knows the day-to-day operations of what happens in there. I just kind of know the broad picture. And what happens on the street level. I kind of help coordinate the different drivers and stuff. So.
Do you have a sense of what's going on in other places in the state as far as what city responses or community responses are to homelessness?
Yeah, so in every corner of the state, no matter what you do, you're going to have the NIMBY problem, the not in my backyard problem. Everybody wants to help, but nobody wants to help right next door. That's just kind of the nature of what we run up against. There are some really good groups doing work. You have the Mission Machine in Searcy, who is similar to the van. You have the Rust Bus in Russellville, who is similar to the van. Actually, both of those organizations started out under the 501 umbrella of the van. They are now their own organizations. They have their own 501c3. They have their own funding. It's awesome. Mainly because Aaron doesn't have to do the paperwork anymore, but also because they can kind of do their own, go in their own directions. Homelessness is not a Little Rock problem. It's not a North Little Rock problem. It happens in Jonesboro. It happens in Brinkley. It happens, Arkadelphia. So it is something that all of our places are having to, be it cities and towns or counties or whatever, we're having to figure out how to deal with and how to mitigate. So you have some different organizations that do take what I consider to be a more punitive approach. They want to pass a blanket sleeping ban, to where they can, just run folks out of town. But you have other places who are taking this more seriously. You have city leaders who have been to different states like Austin or Texas, Austin in Texas, Denver in Colorado to see what they're doing there. They brought some really good ideas about. You have a lot of cities who are now hiring full-time grants professionals who are trying to bring in grant money to start things. And I am very, very excited to say that my friend who is the man who started the Rust Bus in Russellville is now the mayor of Russellville. So we have an individual with homeless, and to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, and I really hope I'm wrong, so feel free to correct me. I will be happy to be corrected. Russellville is the only city that has an actual sanctioned campground within city limits. So, and it's working.
What about Fort Smith?
They have something similar. I don't think it's an active campground. They have done something with like a tiny home kind of modular system. I haven't been up there to see it, and I'm not sure if it's in city limits or if it's just outside of city limits. So I need to become more educated about that myself. I just don't get up there very much. But there is I forget the actual term of it. There is an organization that is based out of Northwest Arkansas that kind of connects resources for all of that area because Arkansas is a rural state. So you'll get people who are in Arkadelphia or Russellville or Fort Smith or Fayetteville, Springdale that has certain problems that they're just not equipped to solve there. They can connect them with resources. The state also has kind of too few of them, but there are crisis stabilization centers that are popping up as a result of the opioid epidemic. The people who run that, I think there's supposed to be 4 more that are popping up. The people who organize those are trying to tie it into also providing services for unsheltered communities because the opioid epidemic has affected the unsheltered communities so much. So they're able to provide those. So again, ties back to Bettina's question. You're seeing more of an organizational standpoint start to congeal. I remain hopeful. Pessimistically so sometimes, but I do remain hopeful. I think people are starting to say, hey, we've got to do something.
Has anybody ever considered a small apartment complex type of thing where you have like 1 or 2 room apartments?
Yes, they have. And so HUD has actually started up several of those. They usually become a Section 8 housing unit. Now, as far as any private individuals who have started that, I'm not aware of any. But because usually they end up getting tied into some type of Section 8 housing contract through HUD. But that's typically where that service lives. In other states, you have seen really actually cool just outside of Portland, they have started renovating connexes, those little square metal buildings that they set on the back of trucks to haul people. They insulate them and turn them into one-bedroom apartments. They're sturdy, they can survive earthquakes and hurricanes. I continually make jokes because I know how to weld that I'm just going to stack 4 of them on top of each other and make my own house out of that because they will survive everything. And also they if you go down to Whole Foods, they're pretty decorative if you want them to be. So there are organizations that have taken those and have revamped them, done plumbing and insulated them, and turned them into little apartment complexes. Usually that's on private ground. I don't know of any private individuals who have done that to a large scale in Arkansas. They have to, and I think that would have to happen on county grounds too. I'm not sure how code enforcement in some larger places would feel about that. I think it could be done within the code, or the code could be changed. So,
when we were talking earlier before the meeting started, you mentioned some litigation in the Ninth Circuit. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Arkansas is in the 8th Circuit, so this does not apply to us in the federal court system. But the Ninth Circuit has a case history. It was actually out of Boise, Idaho. It's Martin v. Boise, if anybody wants to look it up. And what that case was about is the city of Boise basically passed a blanket sleeping ban. You could not sleep on public grounds anywhere within the city limits. It was illegal, and they would ticket you for it, to which they did to several people. And those people linked up with, was it the ACLU that ran that case out of there? I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, they found representation, and they sued. And this went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit. And what the Ninth Circuit said is they took account. They said, based on the last point in time count from HUD, which HUD does every 2 years, you have a population, I forget what it was, we'll just, for the sake of it, we'll say you have 2,000 individuals who are experiencing homelessness at any given time in Boise. You have 1,000 beds available at any given time. That's a deficit. So at any given time, only half of your unsheltered population has access to shelter. So what the Ninth Circuit said is that in the Ninth Circuit, if your city passes a blanket sleeping ban and you do not have adequate shelter provided for your unsheltered population, and you criminalize that sleeping behavior, then what you have done is you have criminalized their existence. And that is an 8th Amendment violation in the Ninth Circuit. If you violate an amendment, we have a couple of them, but first 8 are typically the ones that get hit the hardest, or the 13th or 14th, which they're, never mind. Sorry. That means punitive damages. That means that there's a lot of things that go into that. So then that is still existing law in the Ninth Circuit, but it's gotten tricky to do because now that's the existing case law. Places are making sure that they, for better or worse, they make sure that they look at the adequate number of beds, and sometimes they're creating more beds and they're incentivizing shelter systems. The other ones are narrowly tailoring their municipal code, which, to be fair, I don't think is a bad thing. Because what they're saying is, hey, we don't want people sleeping within 20 feet of the steps of City Hall or the courthouse or these really, really busy highways where people are getting hit by cars and stuff like that. So you can't sleep there, but they don't say anything else about the rest of the city. So you can legally sleep in the rest of the city. So that gives a place where people can go and lay down without fear of getting arrested or ticketed for those things. I think that's personally a good middle ground because we do have to, you do have to be able to function locally. People do deserve to, be able to walk into their work without being harassed if that's what's happening or anything else. But people also need a place to sleep. We're human beings. Most of us, I think I've stayed up for 3 or 4 days straight, but I don't want to do that again. That was a couple years ago when we had 10 days of freezing weather and I just stayed there the whole time. But we don't want to do that too often. If you're a human, you have to sleep. So you got to find a place to lay down. If you're a human, you have to eat food. And certain things happen after you eat food. It goes certain places. So you have to have places to get rid of that, right? These are just the natural functions of the body. So you have to be able to allow people space to do that. So when we don't have those places, Little Rock's a good place. It's hard to find a public restroom after 8 o'clock in Little Rock. Folks got to use the bathroom. That's just kind of the way the body works. So if you in the Ninth Circuit, if you don't have adequate facilities, you cannot do a blanket criminal ban on sleeping and sitting. Private individuals are still free to put up no loitering signs on private property, and in other places, like I said, they narrowly tailor their ordinances. So that's what happened in the Ninth Circuit. It is a growing trend. Ninth Circuit's still the only one that has agreed with that, but you see cases that are predicated on that argument popping up in every jurisdiction. There was actually one here in Arkansas that was passed, but the court found that it was essentially moot because it was a COVID situation, and by that time the COVID pandemic had eased up a little bit, and so they said, hey, the criminalization element and the distinctions are moot now. So.
A couple other questions. I'm going to let Bettina go.
Real quick, sorry. So more housing would be good, I guess.
Right.
But is that enough, or do you have to have services wrapped around housing?
That is a great question. You have to have services. If you have housing without services, then you're going to fail. If you have services without housing, then you're going to fail. It has to be a holistic, robust effort. And again, this is what, I think it's great when you have people that care about these issues, that step up and work with organizations that can work with them, be it local government or your religious institutions, anything, any organization that has money and space. You have to include both, though. And you have to continue to follow up. One of the things that I've seen in my work is we will have folks who are ready to go inside. They'll come in and say, hey, I'm ready to go inside, and we'll work with them. We'll take them down. We'll hook them up. Ready to go inside. They are ready to transition into housing after being outside for a long period of time. And while they were outside, they've developed relationships with other unsheltered folks. They have family units that depend on each other. They're used to seeing their friends all the time. And so then we take them and we say, all right, we're going to hook you up with a social worker. We're going to, if you're older, you can get Social Security. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to make sure you can pay your rent. And we take them and we move them into a place they're unfamiliar with, and we stick them inside a small apartment, and give them a TV and turn it on Channel 4 and say, hey, just watch and keep yourself busy. And they get lonely. Yeah. And they get bored, and they miss their friends, and they miss their families. Some of them turn to substance abuse for coping mechanisms. Some of them have suicidal ideation. Some of them just really decide that, hey, living outside was survivable, and I did it for years, and I can still do it. I miss my friends. Mm-hmm. I miss that human connection, and no one comes and sees me anymore. And if you're in certain buildings downtown that are HUD-based or something else, your friends can't get through the front door anyway. They can't come up to see you. You have to have an ID to get in. They're very guarded. They want to make sure that they know who's coming in those buildings for security reasons and stuff, so folks can't just come hang out. So people get lonely. And so you have to make sure that you continue to follow up with them, that you continue to foster those relationships, that you continue to connect them with services, make sure that they have everything that they need, both physically and mentally, and including friendship. So that's kind of where we're hoping to plug those gaps too. Cumberland Towers are good. I've got some friends who live in there now, and I don't do it as much as I should, but I do try to get down there about once every 2 weeks to go say hi to folks, and they appreciate it.
There was some initiative I saw last month. I think it was on Instagram. I follow the Little Rock CBB, mm-hmm. and it was something that the businesses downtown, or business owners downtown, were trying to do in regards to the homelessness situation. And I wish I could remember the name of it. It was some kind of new program that they were trying to get the city on board with. And I often get sucked into things like that, mm-hmm. and then realize it's just a bunch of rich white people trying to keep homeless people out of their, business areas. Yeah. And so how do we vet things like that? Can we just put that in the Facebook group and say, hey, is this legit, or is this a bunch of,
Yeah, I think you can crowd resource that to find out what's going on and who with them. Go to those meetings. In my history, I've been part of the Arkansas Homelessness Association Council. I've been a part of different groups, and some of them you get in there and you realize, hey, these are good people who are doing real work, and a lot of it's get in there saying, hey, these are people who put this on their resume so they can have a blip and community service and this, that, and the other. It's hard to tell the difference, and again, it's very similar to telling the difference between that person who's asking you for money on the corner and the best advice I can do is to just go take, fist bump them because of COVID, but, we're not handshaking anymore. But just go give somebody a fist bump and talk to them and find out what's going on with their. Some of those organizations do want to do good things. Some of them you have folks who take the other one and it's more of a NIMBY situation. I can't speak to the pros or cons of that specific event, but it is an issue, yeah. But you just got to talk to folks.
Caleb, a lot of the homeless have dogs.
They do.
And my theory is that they have those dogs because they can trust the dog.
Yep.
They can't trust the rest of us.
That's very true.
Just a comment.
No, you're not wrong. So every other Tuesday. So one Tuesday I go out in Southwest Little Rock. The other Tuesday I go to North Little Rock. When I do Southwest Little Rock, I go and pick up a woman, and she actually helps me in the van. She lives outside, and she's got a little Pomeranian-looking dog, Papillon, a little bitty puppy. Its name's Crybaby. It's adorable. And I pick them up. She rides with me. She helps me in the van. That is the most well-behaved dog I've ever seen, and I have 3 of them at home that I wish would listen to me as much as that dog, because they spend every waking moment with that animal. That animal is by their side constantly. The van also takes, and we pass out flea collars when we have them. We pass out food. So when people ask me about donations, if you got pet supplies, food, flea collars, stuff like that, we'll take them. We got folks with dogs out there. But scientifically speaking, we know that companion animals are a very valid and real resource now. We see them being used from everything to cure anxiety, ADHD issues, to wounded vets. We know that helps people functionally. And so I think that also, now, most of the animals that you see out with folks who are living outside have not been trained as service animals. They're just an animal that they found and they kept. But they provide that same service. They provide that same companionship. And it is a constant. And this is what I tell people all the time. When you are desperate, people in desperate situations will do desperate things, right? But one of the things that is severely lacking in the unsheltered community is consistency. It's something that's constantly there. They have a tent, and a rainstorm knocks it down. They build relationships. Well, that person moves inside, or gets arrested, or goes off, or does something else, just disappears, or they pass away. Which is even worse, because people who are unsheltered die at a rate 10 times faster than their house partners or their house equivalents do for the same things that we pass away from, but at a much higher rate. So they lack that consistency. They lack something constant in their life. So a lot of times why you see people in the same areas, because they just want something familiar. And that animal is also a constant in their life. It is something that's going to be there day in and day out. They're very attached to them. And again, very well behaved. When we do our emergency shelters, we don't leave dogs out. You are welcome. Bring your pet, bring your partner. We don't discriminate if you are married, if you are a couple, if you are a same-sex partner, if you are a trans person, use the bathroom that you feel comfortable using. We don't care. Just come inside and don't freeze. And bring that fur baby with you, because it gives me something to play with at 2 a.m. So that's a very good point, and I appreciate you making it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the statistic I heard that the average new American home being built is like 2,500 square feet or 2,600 square feet, and it's probably very far away from any jobs. Probably costs $300,000 or more, and so we're building all these really big houses really far away from anything, and we've got a lot of the older, smaller houses that are more economical, that maybe would be more sustainable for somebody who's on the economic edge.
Right.
And those smaller houses are kind of, they're deteriorating with time. A lot of them are owned by slumlords who are putting in the absolute minimum to be able to keep that viable. And then you also have the tension of, here we are in what I've heard called minimum wage country. Mm-hmm. How can people afford even a low rent, even that slum house? And so it seems like there's just this constant turnover of problems here. Yeah. The low wages lead to them only being able to live in slum houses. The slum houses become uninhabitable. They are on the street, and there's not any new housing being built that would be economically appropriate for somebody on the lower end of the income spectrum. And in terms of like root causes, what do you think about that in terms of, zoning, NIMBYism, and just the costs of creating housing?
This is one of those times where a lot of times government is the problem. This is one of those times where government can be the solution. I am really hoping we start to see a change by 2026, and here's why. As part of the American Rescue Plan that was put forward, that gave a lot of money to get the economy rolling after COVID. And it goes to everything from our water systems, which a bunch of money just got released to this very thing. There is money available and money being used that is for projects for affordable housing that will be used specifically and solely for low-income housing that will have to be finished by 2026. And there are several, both on the county level and the city level in Arkansas, there are several of your cities that are using that money for that purpose. And they are going in and they are taking some of the existing houses that you said that have some structural problems, and they are investing in those homes. A lot of places, I can't speak specifically for any city or town in Arkansas, but there are a lot of places that have tax incentives for buying a house in a low-income area or a house that needs some work, and they will provide tax incentives for rebuilding those for the purpose of providing low-income housing. So we are seeing some governmental plug-ins that are geared towards fixing that problem. It's not a panacea by any means, but it is at least a step in the right direction. I am really hoping that some of this American Rescue Plan funding for low-income housing produces actual affordable housing in our cities and towns, and not just housing structures outside in the periphery of areas. So I am hoping we'll see more of that.
Are there any other questions? Caleb, you have given us generously of your time and your information. Thank you so much.
If I can, I've spoken a lot about the van, but if I can finish with one thing, since we were just talking about affordable housing and the laws in Arkansas, the session just started. The general session for the Arkansas legislature just started. Contact your representatives. Ask them what they plan to do to fight this issue. What laws? Ask them about a warranty of habitability. Find out if they will support legislation for a more robust warranty of habitability. Talk to them. Say, hey, if this legislation crosses your desk, we would really appreciate you to take an actual look at it. See what it does. See the people that's going to help. Find a way to work with it. Talk to the people who are pushing it. Because it's important. It's important in a town of DeVal's Bluff, where I'm coming from, where I used to live, 500 people, or the most populous city in Arkansas, Little Rock. It's going to help out a lot of people. So talk to your legislators. Call your local government. Say, hey, you guys also talk to your legislators. Get everybody involved. Let them know that Arkansas should not be the only state that has an actual warranty of habitability, and we should not be the only state that criminalizes poverty by having a criminal eviction statute. So that would be my one, if we have a call to action, as I think people like to call it, that would be my one thing. Help us fight, and the easiest way to do that is pick up the phone. So I appreciate you all having me, and I'm going to stick around for a little bit. If you need anything, feel free to come up to me.
Thank you. So now you get me again. We hope that you've enjoyed today's meeting. We do have the donation station set up in the back to collect items for the van, and I forgot mine, so I'll be getting in touch with Caleb or the van to get those to him. In addition to being grateful for the van, we hope that you're glad that there's somebody in Arkansas organizing a secular community. We need volunteers. We need people to help with things like graphic design and website development, to write letters for issues that come to our attention about church and state violations. We need help getting press releases out. We need to have people host events like potlucks and child-centered activities and family stuff. If you have skills or ideas to contribute to our cause, talk to me or to one of, if you know any of the other board members, talk to one of us after this meeting, or contact us through our website, You can email us at info@arfreethinkers.org. We ask that you get involved and come to our other events. Our calendar is on meetup.com. I'm not going to bore you with all the details because we have so many things that happen all the time. Next month, our speaker, and I should have written his name down because it's one of those really long German names that I can't pronounce without looking at it. But he is a professor at UALR who will be talking about refugees and diaspora communities and the responses that they have to violence in their home countries. He specializes in the Syrian diaspora, but I'm sure we'll be talking about Afghanistan and maybe others. I mean, I don't know, but probably a lot of us are descended from the Irish diaspora. I know I am. And Jewish diasporas, and there's a lot of diasporas. Refugees happen. So please join us next week. That will be February 19th, same bat time, same bat station, right here. And I'm looking out, and there are people old enough in this audience to know what that means. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.